Hello, my name is Jason Murray and I am a Solutions Readiness Engineer at Cisco, and this is the second video in a series of videos centered around the setting up of a Business Edition server 9.x. In the last video I went through the initial setup of the actual server, like configuring ESXi and deploying a virtual machine, and in this video I'm going to go through the initial setup of three applications: Communications Manager, Unity Connection, and IM and Presence. Now these particular applications are the ones that are supported for use with the actual provisioning manager, and that's what I'm going to be setting up in another video. So we're going to get these set up ready to go for it to push some config to it. And because Unified Provisioning Manager does a lot of the pre-setup and initial integration and configuration of these applications, there's not going to be very much config that we're going to have to do individually in each application. So let's go ahead and get the pre-configuration done so we can get into the next video of using the provisioning manager. Okay, so now we're going to start with Communications Manager because that's our base application that we're going to use in any UC deployment. That's what's required to be installed as part of the BE6K. And we'll find out here that really the only thing that we're going to need to configure on the Communications Manager itself is going to start some services. Now we're going to do some LDAP configuration as well because we want to do some LDAP authentication, and we'll have to get that set up. So first thing we're going to do is set up the services, and we're going to use the drop down and go to Cisco Unified Serviceability and click the Go button. And that will take us to the serviceability page, and on this page we're going to go to the Tools menu, Service Activation. Now there's some other services on here that we're not going to start right now just because this is a demonstration. So we're only going to start the Call Manager, CTI Manager, the TFTP, and then of course we need the Axle Web Service for everything that does in the back end. That needs to be started. And then we're going to do the Cisco DirSync service, and that's used for the LDAP authentication setup that we're going to do here in just a moment. So once we have those checked, we're going to hit save and then hit OK. Now these other applications or these other services that are listed here, that's up to you on whether you need to start them or not. Some people have more services than this, but this is what I need to get the base demonstration done. So it just takes a few minutes or a few seconds to activate it, and as you can see it says activated. So we're going to go back to the admin page and we're going to go set up LDAP because that's basically the only thing that I need to get set up to get our demonstration going. Everything else will be pushed out through UPM. So we'll go to the system menu, LDAP system, and then we'll actually need to enable syncing from an LDAP server. So we'll check this box and hit save. That gets the service started. And we go to System, LDAP, and then we're going to go to the Authentication section. We're going to do authentication for the end users because we want one place to do authentication from, and I've already got it saved in my clipboard, so we're going to paste that in here. The distinguished name. Now you could use this long name here, or you can do administrator at domain, whatever, but I choose to use the containers. Search space, going to look a little similar to the distinguished name, although it's only in, all my users are created in the users container, so that's where we're going to search. And then we're going to put in the actual IP address of the LDAP server, and the port number is 389. So we're going to hit save. And that's saved, good to go. So we're going to go in and do the actual directory setup. And since there's nothing on this server, it's brand new, straight out install, we're going to click add new. It's going to warn us that any existing users, which there are none, will be deleted. Let me go ahead and hit OK on this as well. Alright, so pretty much the same config as the authentication page, just we got to give this configuration a name, and since we're using Active Directory, I'll just give it MSAD as a name, and then the rest of the config is pretty much the same. Same distinguished name, same password. Now I'm using the domain administrator account in my lab. You can use whatever one you decide to use. Just make sure you put it in there that has rights to do this. And then the search base, I only have users in the users container. Now the rest of this config you can set up, how often it syncs, whatever you want to do. It's up to you, but I don't need to do any of that configuration. I just need to put the IP address of the LDAP server here. Port name's already set up, and we click save. Okay, now we're going to do a perform full sync. So we're going to actually pull in those users from the LDAP server, and sometimes this takes quite a little bit of a time before the actual users show up, but you can go to user management, in user, and do a find, and no, they haven't showed up yet, but they will here in a second. We'll come back and check later, but the next thing we're going to do is actually configure Unity Connection. Now in Unity Connection, there's not very much stuff that you need to do, and if you look at this little error here, don't worry about it. We're going to handle this in another video, actually license the system. But in Unity Connection itself, there's not a lot of config you need to do. There's not even any services that you need to start in Unity Connection in order to get it ready for UPM to push config to it. There's only one thing that we're going to actually change or modify, and that's in the class of service. And then click on the voicemail user class of service. And in order for Jabber to get the mail tab, and we'll show that in the actual demonstration, but we're going to need to check this box and allow IMAP access and click save, and that's it. That just allows, like I said, to get Jabber that little tab for voicemail and kind of visual voicemail kind of thing set up in Jabber, and that allows that. So you could set up in user templates, you can set up different settings in there as far as what password you want to give it when the user is imported. You have some things in the authentication rules that you can actually do that will set up, PIN number length, things like that. But we're not going to do any of that because that's all we need to do in Unity Connection. So we're going to move over to CUP now. And every time you install CUP for the very first time, you're going to have to run through this post install. And that's what we're going to do right now. And it's asking for our Communications Manager server, which we're going to put in. We're going to do the host name and then the IP address, and then we're going to hit next. Now our DNS in this lab's not really working too good, so it's not going to really resolve that host name, but it needs something in there to in order to hit next. So you got to put a name in there, and then you got to at least put the IP address. So next thing we're going to do is the Axel user. Now we're going to use the admin account that's on Communications Manager for our Axel user. You could create a separate user to do this, but we're just going to use the admin account that is on Communications Manager. And remember, we started that Axel web service earlier, and we don't want to say passwords. And then security password of Communications Manager, need to know that, so make sure you put that in there. This was done at setup when you installed Communications Manager. Hit next. Again, it asked me to save a password. It's going to spin its wheels a little bit of time. It's a very short post install, just a few things that we're going to have to do. And then once that is actually complete, we're going to see a kind of a information page, what we just set up. It does say that our DNS isn't working, which we know. We're going to hit confirm to go ahead and go, and then we're going to hit the home key to get us to the admin page. Okay, so that brings up the admin page, and there's really one setting we need to change, but in order to change this one setting, domain name, we need to go to and stop a service. So we're going to go to the serviceability page and hit go. Once that page comes up, we're going to use the tools menu, go down to Control Center and then Network Services, Control Center - Network Services. That's going to pull up a list of already running services, and we're going to scroll all the way down to I'm in present services and stop the Cisco XCP router service. So we'll select that, hit stop. It's going to say wait for the page to refresh. So in order to change the domain name, there's 3 services that need to be stopped. There's the present service, there's SIP proxy service, and this particular XCP router service. So if you don't have those stopped, you're not going to be able to change the next setting. Now, since this is a brand new server, there's no services started, so we don't have to worry about those other 2. So let's go back to the admin page, hit go. And then this particular setting is under System Cluster Topology. And then we're going to click on Settings. And there's one setting here that says domain.not.set. And we need to change it. No matter if you have a domain or not, this setting needs to be changed to something. So we do have acme.com set up, so we're going to set this up here. And if you didn't have those services started, you'd see a little warning underneath the box telling you which services need to stop. So we have all those stopped, so we're going to hit saved. And this is basically all you need to do on the present server to get it ready. You could change the IP address from CUP to the IP address if you wanted to not use DNS. We're not going to do that because this is going to work without doing that. We do have some DNS set up, but it's not completely working. So we're going to go ahead and use the drop down, go to serviceability, and start that XCP router service that we just stopped so we could change that domain name. And we're going to go back to the control center. Scroll back down to I'm in present services and select the XCP router service again, and we're going to start it. Takes just a second for it to actually get started, and then what we're going to do once this is done, we are going to start the other services. Since this is a brand new server just brought up, we're going to click service activation, and then you can see all the services are deactivated. I usually hit set default. It basically just kind of checks all the boxes for me. So we'll go ahead and do that. But there's one box it does not check, and is the Cisco Axle Web Service. And we need that for communications between Communications Manager and IM Present server. So need that checked as well as these other ones. So we're going to hit save, and then we're going to hit OK. Okay, so this is going to take just a bit of time to activate all these services and actually start them. So while we're waiting, we can go back to Communications Manager now, and let's check and see to make sure that these users show up that we imported earlier. And now we see that user 1 and user 2 that were in that user container has showed up, and they are active LDAP synchronized users. So now these two users can log in using LDAP authentication. So you only have that one spot where you have users changing passwords instead of having 2 or 3 different places for them to change their password. They only do it in one spot, and usually that's going to be your Active Directory server or your LDAP directory server on your network. So coming back to the page here, it's still spinning. We're waiting for these services to be done, and voila, they are started. And you can see that all these services here are showing up as activated. So we're good to go on that. And that brings us to the end of this video. Like I mentioned earlier, the provisioning manager is going to be doing all the integration for this particular system. So as you've seen, there's not much configuration that we need to do in the applications themselves. So in the next video, what I'll be doing is running through the provisioning manager to actually push out the configuration to these applications to get everything up and running and ready to go. So until then, thanks for watching, and thanks for choosing Cisco.